Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the spot where the conversations are pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Did you bring your thinking caps? Because it's time to put them on. Because the conversation starts now. Christy Roberts. We were just talking about singing bowls, and as my mother was transitioning, I played it for her. And I felt like the universal portal was opening for her journey, for her transition. And I tell people all the time, you don't want to talk about death, but you want to live life. They are synonymous. They go hand in hand. And how you live could be very indicative of how you die. If there's unanswered questions, if there's unresolved emotional trauma, if you lived a volatile lifestyle, if there's guilt, if there's anxiety, if there's shame, but in some situations there's joy, there's peace, there's a comfort in knowing that a person lived a full life. There's comfort in knowing or believing in their faith that one day they will meet again. And Chrissy, you have, dedicated this portion of your life to grief recovery. And I want to ask you a little bit about that. What has been your story and your journey and your truth? As we welcome her to On the Edge Brains. Hello. Hi, guys. This is the
Hi, everyone.
Here. Absolutely. This is a spot where the conversation is pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Today, like I said, we got Christy Roberts from Australia. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some challenges and, just really how to level out and get our head around this thing called death, grief, and dying. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your story and how you arrived at this particular point.
Yeah, grief's not a conversation that in many ways I feel like it chose me. I didn't choose grief. So, my story, my background is corporate. It's HR, it's organizational development. And about 6 years ago, I found that I was really dissatisfied with where I was in life. I was a single parent of 2 teenagers, Adele and Aaron. I was overweight, I was unfit, I was struggling to pay the bills, traveling, 2.5 hours into the city to work in a job that, just didn't even challenge me. And in many ways, my life was really, really average. I was exhausted, stressed out, a whole lot. And there just wasn't enough time or money, April, to do the things that I really valued and really enjoyed in life. So I discovered coaching. And at the time, I thought coaching would be really great for my career in HR and organizational development. I was doing a lot of work in leadership development. And as soon as I hit coaching, I was like, this is my thing, because my biggest takeaway was that although I was relatively happy, I didn't realize how ordinary my life was, right?
Right.
And I think many people could probably relate to that. And so all of a sudden it was like this door opened and there was this whole extraordinary life waiting for me, and it became possible. So I did a lot of work, and I launched my business, Creating Change, a number of years ago, and was really focused on mindset coaching and results coaching. Lost 20 kilos. I'm now the fittest I've ever been in my life. So there was a lot of shift, a lot of changes. But here's the thing, I did all that work, I did everything. And then on the 14th of March, 2020, so right when COVID was just very scary in the world, we didn't know what was happening, tragedy hit my family. And it was a huge, huge blow. It like the worst blow any parent should ever have to experience. And it's tragedy, but it's like beyond comprehension. Like it's very hard to understand. And what happened was my cheeky, fun-loving 18-year-old son, Aaron, was in a car accident and he died on scene, April. So literally, I'm not kidding, in the blink of an eye, like one phone call, my whole life upended. Just absolutely like the foundations collapsed from underneath me. And like, it's absolutely brutal. And I really feel in many ways like it is the hardest thing any parent should have to endure, because I mean, I can't think of anything worse than your child dying, because it defies the natural order of the world, and it defies everything that we strive for and hold true in our life.
Agreed.
Yeah. And let me show you a photo of my boy while I'm here.
Let me see Aaron.
This is Aaron.
Yeah. Oh, he's
Yeah.
handsome.
Very handsome, charismatic, cheeky, fun-loving, smiley boy. Yeah. And he still is.
That's right, because the spirit lives on.
Mm.
But how did
Yeah.
you arrive at that point of, we never get over it. I just lost my mother a few months ago. And like I
I'm
said,
sorry to hear that.
your experience was different because it was so sudden and it was just yanked away from you. And, your son was only 18 years of age. My mother was 91 and she lived a good full life. But that doesn't negate the fact of how much you miss that person.
Oh, not
How
at
much
all.
you love them.
Mm.
But at least I had time to somewhat prepare myself and go through the journey with her. You didn't have that opportunity.
No, I mean, no woman would ever expect an 18-year-old to die. And so suddenly it's brutal. And you're right, grief is a measure of our love, April. So you've had your mother in your life, your whole life.
Right.
Of course you will grieve. But there's a suddenness, there's a trauma, there's different levels, and there's so many different forms of grief. And that sort of suddenness, that trauma, it just, when it's an accident or an overdose or a suicide, there's many different, or a younger death. There's layers. There's many layers, and everyone responds differently to grief as well.
Oh, absolutely. And people think that that you have to go through a certain process. It's going to hit you when it's going to hit you. You know what I mean? You're going to be bargaining with God. You're going to be negotiating. You're going to be angry one moment. You're going to be crying. You're going to be laughing. It's just wherever it hits you. I know I had my meltdown in the grocery store. Christy, I went to grab the graham crackers.
Yep.
Nobody ate graham crackers but Mama. And I just started bawling. And so my husband goes, "Okay, honey, you can push the cart."
Yeah.
He gave me something to do. What do you say to that person that's in that place of bartering and arguing and angry with God and the spirits for taking away their loved one?
We need to process what we feel, because the pain, grief is very primal and it's very raw and it's very deep. So when that, and I've heard many stories of people that know Aaron in grocery stores. One of his best friends works in the grocery store, and for him it was the jam fancies. And so he actually wasn't able to even work in that aisle. It is just your pain. It's just your grief, and grief is love. So what I say to those people is you need to honor what you're feeling, but there are times when it's appropriate and not appropriate, of course. Like if you're at work, it's tricky. So it's about giving your grief some space and giving it time to, if you're angry, be angry, but do it in a way that's resourceful and helpful and healthy for you. Punching walls is not healthy. Yelling and screaming at people is not a healthy way to express your anger. However, going for a walk and really feeling angry in the walk, or writing a letter and telling God or the world or whatever your belief system is how much it sucks and it's not okay, it's a really good way to shift that energy, because it's energy. Emotions are energy. And when we feel them and we process them and we shift them, what happens is they move, they leave our body. But if we don't process the energy and we suppress it and avoid it, I'm going to push the trolley, I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. And if you don't give that the space to feel what you need to feel, it gets stuck.
Right.
And it builds and it builds. And that when it builds into moods, and the moods become depression, anxiety. It doesn't start that way, but if you're not processing what you're feeling, it can end up that way.
Why did you take this on as a mission, as a cause, as a purpose to help other people? Is it still helping you?
Yeah, it helps me a lot. I mean, I've got a very curious mind. Being a mindset coach, like I'm really curious about human behavior. And because the magnitude of what I was feeling was so big, it was like I knew going to a psychologist wasn't enough. I knew I didn't need medication. I knew if I went to a doctor, they would prescribe me medication because that's the model of the world that we live in, right?
Right.
But that wasn't what I needed. That wasn't what I wanted. So I went on this journey to discover, well, how can I heal? How can I process this pain? Because, you know, it was brutal. I was getting heart palpitations, chest pain. You know, there's a condition called broken heart syndrome.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And they say that it,
Takotsubo.
yeah, they
Yeah,
say through a cardiologist, it mimics a heart attack.
yeah. So the acute stress or trauma, it inflames the way the blood pumps through the valves. So, you know, you end up with like I was getting, you know, double beats, irregular beats, really heavy beats. But I started getting severe chest pain. It was spreading into my throat. You know, remember, this is March 2020. I thought I was getting COVID.
Right.
I was scared about not being able to get to my son's funeral. There was so much going on. And so I discovered a modality called self-directed healing. So this is outside of the coaching. And I did a session, and basically what that is, it's a holistic healing modality. We work energetically with deep emotional pain like trauma, grief, anger, anxiety, shame, guilt, even addictions. And we feel those emotions in the physical body, and it works really well with the limiting beliefs as well. I'm never going to be happy again.
Let me ask you a question. You have to read, when you go through that kind of modality, it seems to me, or again, like I said, I've never experienced it, that you're reliving that trauma. Doesn't that
No,
get
yeah.
it?
No, because it's not talk therapy. So with the trauma is heightened emotional response. It's where you haven't been able to process the magnitude of what's happened because of the heightened emotions. And so in self-directed healing, we go into the feeling of the trauma. So we don't need context around, it's not like talk therapy, it's not cognitive, it's not about what happened and taking you through that, reliving that experience. It's how did it make you feel, and giving you a safe space to feel what you need to feel. And when you feel what you need to feel energetically through the body, and we increase that feeling, and the energy moves, it's very cool, but it moves through the physical body. And what it does is then it releases, it goes, it's like it does its work and it moves. And so for me, when I did this, it was 3 weeks after Aaron's death. I went in,
that's pretty soon afterwards.
It was very soon, but I'd seen this lady in action.
Oh, okay.
And I talked to her. I saw her in a group healing situation, and it was the only thing I could think of that could work. And I spoke to her. I'm like, well, is it too soon? And she's gone, the sooner the better. Let's just go in and feel what you need to feel. So I went in, and I had all severe pain. And after we were together an hour and a half, and I'm kid you not, it was gone. The tightness in my chest, my throat, the heart, it all shifted. And even my speech was thick from the shock. It was like I literally biologically shifted the chemicals in my body.
Wow.
Like, you know, because the shock comes in and you end up in this fog, which is what happens in grief and what happens in trauma. And over time, as you can cope with more, the fog sort of clears. And so for a lot of people, it could be 6 months. There's no timeline on this stuff because everyone's different. But for me, it literally shifted in that session. And my speech that was thick, all of a sudden it was clear again. It was like I was in this foggy cloud and all of a sudden it was blue sky.
Were you married?
Crazy.
Are you married? Are you married?
No, I'm single.
Okay. Yeah. Were you, was there a lot of support from your son's father?
Yeah. He's around and but he's remarried and doing his things. So
well, even, you know, with that, there's you'll always be connected through that child, no matter what.
Yes.
No, and so that energy that you feed off of them, or sometimes people bring their own grief and pour that on you. You know, it can be difficult. So I'm glad that you were able to see that. Do you have other children?
Yeah, I have a daughter, Adele. So she's 22 now.
How did that impact Adele?
It was, for her, I mean, it's the biggest thing she'll ever have to experience, because she was the one at home when the police knocked on the door. And losing her brother, you know, they were tight. They were best friends, and they were just getting to a point, because Aaron had turned 18, where they were starting to go out and have fun as adults in their own independent right. And so it's left a hole in her life that can't be filled. So it's devastating as a mother to have to be witness to her journey, because I can't be her therapist.
Right.
But in learning what I'm learning and in sharing what I'm doing, it can help support her through her process as well. Right. She's a smart cookie. She's an honours student at Melbourne Uni, which is the top uni here in the state. And she's studying organisational psychology. So she's quite switched on in many ways, but nothing can help, she just has to process her own pain. Right. And it is a massive hole in our lives now.
So now you're coaching individuals.
I do more group. I work in different ways, April. So I do have some one-to-one clients, but I run workshops. I'm now a self-directed healing practitioner, and I actually am their senior trainer. I run the practitioner training worldwide. So I'm teaching practitioners this modality worldwide. We've actually got 3 Americans coming into our training next month, which is this month, February, which is really great. So that's sort of getting quite a broad reach now.
It's critical that we try to catch it, heal it, work with it before, like you say, you get stuck, because that creates epigenetics, intergenerational trauma. And, the asking endless question of why me, again, my God doesn't play favorites. We're all going to get a turn at the wheel. And it's very shocking, but people don't want to talk about death. And we want to extract the fact just for a moment that your son did die, suddenly. So that's a different set of circumstances. But just every day, or even sharing death with children. I have a friend that, 2 different scenarios. The first one was they didn't want the child to see the corpse in the casket. And then when they did, they told the poor child that, Grandpa's just sleeping. Now the child is traumatized and afraid to go to sleep because they think they're going to end up in a pine box. But on the other hand, I had some other friends, and we were in the car and we were driving past the cemetery, and she goes, my grandma's over there. And I said, really? Yes, that's her final resting place. She was tired, and so she had to go up to heaven. So they just parked her body right there. So as we drive past, I waved to her and I talked to her, because her spirit is still here, Miss April. And I got goose pimples.
I love that.
It was 2 totally different experiences. How do you tell parents to cope with their young children and let them understand that this is, a part of the circle of life?
Yeah. I mean, children are naturally curious, and they don't understand death the way that we do. The thing is people will die. And so it's really important to be honest with children. And if they ask questions, answer them, but answer them in an age appropriate way. David Kessler in his training, that's who I did my certified grief educator certificate with. He talks a lot about children, and he says that, if you ask a child, do they want to go to the funeral? They're going to say no. But who wants to go to a funeral?
Right.
Right. It's important to take them through that process. It's important to let them understand what's going on. It's important to give them that opportunity, because more children will regret not going and not having that opportunity, because that's an opportunity to celebrate life.
Right. And that's what we call it, or have here in America a lot, and in the African American community, we call it a celebration of life.
Yeah.
It's more of a party to acknowledge that person, where we eat and we sing and we dance and we bring out pictures and we really celebrate that person's life and their time here on earth, instead of a funeral, which kind of sounds so final, just,
and it is. Yeah. And I love what you guys do. I wish we had more of that here in Australia.
Yeah. Now, I want to
children, and just going back to children, it's like they will be curious. So just it's being as honest as possible and keeping them in their routine, because they will feed off the adults' energies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if the adult is depressed, sad, angry, the children will feed off that energy. Whereas if the adult is connecting with their love and the sadness that they're not here, but the beauty of their life, it's a different energy.
Exactly. So
Mm.
as you work with your clients, do you do a little NLP with them, a little neuro linguistic programming to help them reframe it, to reshape what's going on and what's going to happen from then on? Because is this a modality that they'll be able to pull resources from after you're finished working with them?
Yeah, with the self-directed healing, it's not NLP. It's very different to NLP because NLP is like very, you're in your mind, whereas grief is a really, it's a heart space.
Mm.
And so the work that I do with the healing, and I bring my coaching skills into that, that's where I've got the best of both worlds, is I don't want to reframe. I want to actually get my clients to a point where they're cognitively, their heart matches their mind.
Mm.
So that what is happening, because we can cognitively through NLP, we can reprogram our mind, we can tell ourselves these things, but if our heart doesn't actually believe it, our body talks to us, and emotions do get trapped in the body. And there's a lot of research now that shows that emotions trapped in the body lead to disease.
Mm-hmm.
So my work is about actually listening to our heart, listening to our body, listening to our inner voice, and giving that space to speak, and then getting it aligned with what's going on in the mind so that everything's congruent.
Right.
Because you don't want that friction. It's like you're doing the gratitude, but your heart's telling yourself something else. It's like there's friction. And so it's how do we remove the friction? Because the other thing about grief is it magnifies our old wounds. So
Right.
if you have a feeling of being abandoned, or if you have a feeling that no one understands me or anything like that, grief will exacerbate that. And so this is the type of work that we can do to move through so that we can actually get rid of that feeling of abandonment, because we process it through the heart, but the mind understands what we're doing.
Mm.
It's very cool work.
I want to ask you about a key term. A lot of people have committed suicide, and you told me that that is really kind of not the appropriate term. And I want to be, sensitive, and I want to be educated with that. What is the proper term for a suicide?
Yeah, it's much nicer to say died by suicide or death by suicide. And the reason for that is because when you say committed, it assumes intent.
Mm-hmm.
They committed, it's a crime. Whereas they haven't. What happens when someone dies by suicide is there is so much pain, they literally just want to switch the pain off. They're not thinking about the family. They're not thinking about all these other things. Their ill mind is not processing the information and the pain properly, and they just want it to turn off. Because you'll know, or you might not know, but a lot of people who attempt suicide and aren't successful, they will come back and they'll say, they just wanted the pain to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So death by suicide and die by suicide is a much better way to speak about it if you're using the terms.
Okay. Yeah, because we just had a beauty queen, beautiful African.
I saw.
And again, you can't tell people's pain and their scars. She had everything that we thought. What else could she ask for? She had beauty, she had brains, she was a beauty queen. I'm sure that she had access to the most affluent suitors around the world, but there was still a lot of pain there. And so many people had no idea of what was going on. And so when you say, again, she just wanted it to stop, and they leave a lot of cryptic messages, it's very difficult because their family, a lot of times, are, shamed or talked about. You should have known. You didn't see the sign. You didn't get them the help that they needed. So that's an extra layer of grief that is compounded to what they're already going through. It's very, very difficult. So I'll be more aware of that moving forward, that it is death by suicide or passing by suicide.
And the research shows that families who are grieving someone who has died by suicide, they don't get as much support. like significantly less support, because people don't know how to support that. There's it can often be a stigma, this doesn't happen in good families, or shame and guilt that's associated with it. And when it comes to the grief work, it's not preventative anymore. It's like, how can we process that grief? And I mean, at the end of the day, people do the best that they can do. And so it's, how can we process those what if questions and the guilt and all the different scenarios? Because at the end of the day, we can't control the actions of somebody else, but we do have choices about how we can work with our grief and process our grief moving forward, and honor them along the way, and still celebrate their life along the way, because their life matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
It is. So let's talk a little bit about what you say. You said to live life fully.
Yeah. And this is what I've learned through my coaching. As I said, I was struggling. I was, that feeling. And I know most people have this feeling where there's more inside you.
Right.
You know that you're capable of so much more than how you're showing up now. And so living your life fully, it works from a grief aspect, but also for everybody. It's like, how can I be my best self? Because when you've got that vision of what it is you want in your life and where you're heading, and what is your passion and purpose, and what's true for you, what you value, and you get some direction around that, where you're going in life, and you start mapping out the steps to get there, you start taking the steps, what happens is your world, it's like you're opening doors. And when it comes to grief, I know as a griever, it feels like the world shuts in on you, and the world can get very small, because going out, you can get triggered. I mean, in the grocery store aisle, going to the shops is massive. Even driving the car, and I see school kids, or you see a lady your mother's age going down the road, you get triggered just even being out in society. So for a lot of people, their world can get very small. So my work is about working with the triggers, because the triggers is your pain. So you need clarity around, well, what is it you want in your life? What's important to you? You want to be 80 looking back, or 90 looking back and thinking, wow, I did a fantastic job.
Right.
Like, I lived fully.
Or maybe not even a fantastic job. I just did something.
I
left an imprint in this world.
Yeah. You just don't want those regrets.
No, you don't. How do you want to be memorialized? How do you want to be remembered, Chrissy?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like I'm bringing Aaron with me. So it's like we're both going to be remembered. I want to make a difference. I want to help people heal. Grief is such rocky terrain, and it's not spoken about enough. That's one of my biggest learnings, is the world doesn't understand grief. So I want to be remembered as somebody who has helped people understand the world of grief and help them actually feel what needs to be felt. Because I don't believe we need medicine. I believe there is definitely instances where people do, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I believe that we can heal. A lot of this healing it can be done naturally. It can be done organically, holistically, without all that. It's just through learning how to connect with ourselves, connect with our bodies. And so my work, I just want to be remembered as someone who was courage, had courage in the face of adversity, that can still live a great life in spite of the trauma and the grief of losing my son. Like, it's still possible.
Right. So what brings you joy at this particular juncture in your life? What makes you happy outside of, seeing the change of other individuals and seeing them, work through this process? But what really brings you joy?
I love camping. I love just getting away and connecting with nature. And I've just bought a kayak for Christmas, so I've been going paddling.
Oh, that's fun. That's a lot of fun.
So I'm finding these beautiful lakes and going out with friends, and I just love slowing down and just being in nature at the moment. I'm finding that really soothing.
What is one of your favorite memories of your son?
Oh, I've got this memory of him. He's so naughty. He was cheeky. We went camping. He was about 4 or 5. And we did like a little night stroll with our torches, and he's gone, and I'm like, don't get wet. And the next minute he comes back, he's up to his neck in water.
Oh my God.
But it was the face. I've got this photo and it's like, and I'm trying not to laugh.
Oh my God.
And he's so naughty, but I just love it.
What do you say to the person that is really on the brink? You know, a lot of people go from a flicker to a flame. They want to be with that person so bad that they even contemplate suicidal thoughts themselves. What do you say to that person that might be struggling right now?
They need to reach out for support, and there is support available. I mean, I remember backing out of my driveway to go grocery shopping and thinking, why am I even here? Like, what is the point if my son is not here with me? So I get it. It's connecting with those things that you do enjoy. But the thing is when you're in that state, that can be very challenging. So just connect with people, talk about it, because having your pain witnessed is probably the most powerful thing that you can do. Mm-hmm. When you feel seen in your pain and you can share that load with someone, it really does make a difference.
I don't know the circumstances around your son's accident, but what do you say to a person when it comes to forgiveness? I had a situation here, a neighbor across the street. He was blinded by the sun, and he ran past the intersection, and a woman was pushing her baby in the stroller. She was able to push the baby past, but he hit and killed her.
Oh, wow.
And the family, her family, I understand what they're saying. They went to court. They wanted a civil suit, and he's devastated.
Yeah, of course.
How do you start forgiving? I mean, it was a freak of nature. I know the kid, again, like I said, I've known him for years. I never seen him, under the influence or anything. He just said, Miss April, I was blinded by the sun. Maybe he was going too fast. I don't know. But how do you help people forgive? Now, there's other situations where there's been murders. I've had a couple guests on my show that have actually killed people. And they have been redeemed and they have been forgiven. People have, overdosed. The person that's committed suicide, the family is very angry with them. Yes, they're hurt, but they're saying to myself, my God, I was here for you. I would have done anything for you. But you had this conversation rattling around in your brain and you wouldn't let me in. How do they begin to forgive?
I think forgiveness needs to come from within because, in my opinion, you can't control what other people do and feel. And so it's coming back to you. What do you need forgiveness for? Does that need to be processed? Looking at the circumstances, going through the what ifs, because your mind will play the guilt stories. It's what our minds do. They do the guilt, they do the shame, they do the what ifs, they do all the different scenarios. And then there comes a point where you move through all that. And sometimes it's accepting that this is what it is. And then what am I going to do with this pain? Because I believe forgiveness is a choice. And there are circumstances where there are people who publicly say, I don't forgive the murderer. And that's their choice. But for that person who wants forgiveness, they need to forgive themselves.
So the earnest really starts with self before you can be, again, and he really struggled with that,
Of course, that's a big deal.
Yeah, this will always hang over my head. Now there's a child without a mother and, all of these things. But again, like you said, forgiving yourself before waiting for the family, because again, the family will possibly never forgive.
May not. But how he shows up, there's a ripple effect in that. I believe our energy affects the energy of people around us.
Mm-hmm. So this is a little bit off the mark, but do you believe in reincarnation? Do you think that we come back in some state or form, and we're not talking from a religious perspective, but I believe so. I really believe.
Yeah, I'm really curious about it. And I feel, especially with Aaron passing, I'm really keen to explore those spiritual boundaries now. I mean, my nan was very spiritual. She was a medium, very highly regarded, recognized, studied. But I didn't really go down that path. But now I'm kind of thinking, I think it would be really interesting. I mean, I'm very open to the idea. I don't have solid beliefs about reincarnation. I believe that there are some people that come back and you feel their old souls.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you felt like something very euphoric.
Yeah.
You've been
Yeah.
here, you've been here before. Deja vu.
Mm.
You know,
Yes.
there's a
Yeah.
smell. There's music, or you hear certain things. Um, in this line of work, there are so many different, um, again, belief systems
Mm.
that can counteract with that. And we talk about a religious perspective. People have different religious beliefs, they have different cultural beliefs, they have different ceremonial beliefs, all of that. Are you able to kind of help them mitigate no matter where they are? Because there's a learning for you as well as a learning for them.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about other cultures, and I'm really open to learning as much as I can. The grief world in many ways is fairly new to me. So I feel like I'm on this big discovery tour. And people do it differently. People definitely grieve differently in different cultures. My work and my philosophy or my approach is I meet my client wherever they are.
Mm.
And that's okay, because, and this is the thing with the healing and the coaching work that I do, it doesn't matter what your belief system is, because all we're doing is feeling emotion.
Mm.
So it supports the client in no matter what their belief system is, because it transcends. It's
Do you
bigger
think
than that.
do you think that this is something that you could introduce to someone as young as how old?
Oh, we've done it with 4-year-olds.
No, really?
Yeah. 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 So, I
Wow.
mean, self-directed healing has elements of going back to inner child. You can also do past life work with self-directed healing. We don't do that with children. Children know how to feel their emotions, but often they're not given an opportunity, or they'll model off their parent, or they'll shift to fit in with the environment that they're in. Like, it might not be okay for them to feel anger, for example. That's not okay. And so what we do in the self-directed healing, it's like, of course you feel angry. Let's sit down and be angry together. And where are you feeling that? And where is it? And what is it? Is it like a ball? Can we make the ball bigger? And so you can
Right,
just,
right.
and they move through this very quickly. Kids know how to feel. We've developed a program for 5 to 15-year-olds because this work needs to be taught. The younger people just learn how to feel their emotions. It's called self-directed healing for a reason, because you can direct this, you can do it yourself.
Mm.
What is it I'm feeling? Where is it in my body? Feel it more, and then let it pass. It will go naturally.
Mm.
Yeah. So the more we can teach kids that it's okay, if they feel sad, if they feel guilty about something, if they feel ashamed, of course they do. Let's just honor that and feel that it's there for a reason.
Now, you told me that you are penning a book. You haven't completed it, but what's going to be inside the pages of that book? What are you going to talk about, Chrissy?
I'd really love to, I've developed a grief program, and so I'd love to have that mapped out in the chapters, about how to navigate the grief world and how to support yourself in grief. So it's an optimistic look at living with grief, how you can still live your life fully in spite of the grief and the pain or trauma that you've experienced. Because not every grief experience has trauma, you know,
Right.
but every trauma has grief. And so it's how do we traverse that and go through that experience? And just, I'm really practical. I love practical tools and tips and strategies and that sort of thing. So it'll be just filled with lots of tips and ideas of things that people can use to help them navigate through that really rocky terrain, because it is, those emotions will swing like a pendulum. You can be in the grocery aisle 1 minute and you're fine, and the next minute you're crying over a box of cookies, and that is the nature of grief. And so the more I can share my learnings and my experiences and other people's experiences through this grief world and normalize the conversation, the better the world's going to be.
And I ask you, Brains, that if you're experiencing, trauma or grief, to reach out to someone brilliant like Christy Roberts that's going to really help you through this. I've got a friend that lost her husband, her brother, and her mother all within about 18 months of each other. Just boom,
Brutal.
boom, boom. And I'll be talking to her and she'll go into this dark place. And I worry about her, you know. But she has so much. And I asked her, so well, maybe you want a group. She says no, because people are in different stages at that group. I don't want to talk to them about that. It's hard for people to open that shell. And when you work with a group of individuals like that, there's a lot of support there, a lot of camaraderie. You know, your situation as far as your loved one passing may not be the same, but as Chrissy said, you are going to feel the pain. You're going to go through all of these cycles, and you don't want to be alone. You want to know that there is someone that you can talk to, that you don't have to be alone in these circumstances. You are an amazing gift. And thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for turning your pain into your passion.
Thank you. And can I just talk to that friend briefly of yours that had 3 losses? Firstly, oh my goodness.
Would you talk to her, please?
Yeah. When it comes to multiple loss, it's important to give each loss its own space. And you can think of it like if you were visiting a friend, you would give them that one time. So you might write your husband a letter, or give them an evening, or listen to their favorite music, or go to their place, or cook a meal they loved. And then the next day you go visit someone else. And it could be 5 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be a full day, but it's just one at a time. Because what happens is with grief, when there's multiple losses, one will come in and then the other one will go, what about me? And what about me? And it's too much, so you don't go anywhere.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so just focus on one at a time. If someone else comes knocking on the door, just say, oh, I'm with Jimmy right now.
Right.
I'll be with you shortly, or I'll come to you tomorrow.
Right.
And just give that some space. Yeah.
And, and understand that you are not the only one in a lot of circumstances that has lost someone. In your situation, it wasn't just you losing your son, but your ex-husband lost a son, and your daughter lost a brother, and their friends lost a friend.
Every single person I know is grieving.
Everybody is grieving in their own way. So allow them that space. Grief is not something you can be selfish with.
Yeah. And support is really important. So it can be hard to go to a group, but I would encourage your friend to just give it a go. Just go for 3 weeks. And it's getting the right group as well. I've been to some grief support groups, and you go in there and literally everyone's just talking about how terrible they feel. And yes, it is important to have that pain witnessed. My grief support group that I'm just about to launch, I want to know how people are feeling, but I also want to give them tools that they can connect with the love, that they can integrate the pain, and then they can have hope that they can still live a great life in spite of their pain. So it's more than just coming in and witnessing pain.
And allowing yourself to continue to live.
It's so important.
And it was hard for me going through my mother's things, because you want to keep every single thing. Oh, I remember when she wore that sweater, or we had, I remember she ate from that fork and that was her favorite bowl. But again, you have to let some of those things go to open up space for what is going to happen next. And you don't have to feel guilty about that. Throwing out, clothes that maybe that person's not going to wear, or going through their things, and maybe there were books that you will never read that person enjoyed. You don't have to hoard their life.
And it's also important not to get rid of everything too early, because as a shock response, you can go in and clear out and then later on go, oh, I wish I had have kept. So there's no rush. Grief takes time. It takes time to get your life back on track. It's just honoring that space. It's heavy. It's heavy. It's exhausting. It's hard.
But it is, again, I always tell people, it's a part of the process. It's a part of the learning. Yeah, it is. Like you said, it's love,
Yeah.
The harder you grieve is the harder you loved. And so, Brains, what we want to try to do is we want to try to live our life to the fullest. We want to try to be good. We want to be kind. We want to be respectful. We want to honor people's space. We want to honor their dignity in every which way that we can, because how we live our life could ultimately be, what we have to contend with when we die. Secrets, conversations that you have never had with people. Maybe there's a discord that you want to mend. Maybe there is a joke you want to tell. Maybe there is a recipe that you want to share. Do that. Live
Yeah.
live each moment as if it was your last, because we don't live day by day anymore, especially with the state of the world and this COVID and all this stuff. We exist moment by moment. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. So enjoy it, live it. If you're struggling with it, if you want a good conversation, contact Christy Roberts. Please tell them how to get in contact with you, beautiful.
Thank you. So I've got a couple different avenues. I've got a YouTube channel, so I'm sharing regular content around grief, around coaching, around healing. So that's Christy Roberts Coaching. So hop on there and subscribe. I've also, my website is christyrobertscoaching.com, and I'm just launching a grief masterclass. So that's coming up in 2 weeks' time, the first one. So you can access that through the events on my website, through the events page, and you can also access that through the YouTube channel. But I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. So
just tell us a little bit about what you're going to do in that mastermind. What is that? Give us a snapshot.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks. So the event is for people who are grieving or who are supporting someone through grief, but it's also designed to support leaders, coaches, healers, and therapists if they want to know and understand a bit more about grief, if they're working with people who are grieving. So the purpose is to just give practical tools and strategies and to improve grief literacy. I'll be covering a number of different things. I'll be talking about the different types of grief, because it comes in all different shapes and forms, and we're all unique. We all respond differently. I'll be talking about emotions in grief, how to process those deep emotions, the stages of grief, the needs for the grieving, tips for dealing with early grief and that acute stage of surviving grief at the very beginning, tips for supporting others. And also I'll be talking about the grief timeline and how we can integrate that loss and honor our loved one moving forward. So there's a lot of content that's packed in there, and that's just a free masterclass. It's my way of giving back and honoring my son.
Wow, that's beautiful. Right, take advantage of it. There's so many people, again, that have lost people spontaneously. They have not had the opportunity to say that final "I love you." I remember when, at the height of the pandemic, they were looking at their loved ones through glass.
Oh,
they
crazy times.
They were trying to say goodbye on an iPad.
Yeah.
On a cell phone. Anything that they could do to let that person know. So don't wait till the last minute. I kiss my husband and I wake up in the morning and I call him Mr. Magnificent. And he goes, yes. And I say, good morning, I love you. He goes, I love you too. And that's all every day. We've been married 37 years and I don't miss a day.
Yeah,
even when I'm crunchy, when I'm mad at him or got a scowl on my face, but I tell him I love him. So it's important that we do that. Thank you so much, Chrissy, for being a light in a somewhere dark place and doing the work that you do. And again, I know that your son is so proud of you. To whom much is given, much is required.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me here today. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Brains. Go in and like, love, share, subscribe, sign up for the masterclass. If not for you, these might be tools that you can help someone else with. Or, maybe you want to go into this field of work. It's very complementary to people that are doing palliative care or hospice care. It's great if you are a clergy. It's great if you are a funeral officiant. You can use these tools in a lot of different ways. Thank you so much, Chrissy. Come back and see me again. Okay?
Thank you. I will.
All right. Bye, Brains.